Simon, we've talked about how communities, church communities particularly, can be welcoming and open to those newly coming into their area. Some church communities, some existing residential communities are not always happy about new groups coming in of whatever kind they may be. Have you got any thoughts about how we can enable existing, often very established communities to respond positively to new groups coming into their midst?
You're right, this is a really big issue, and one of the challenges across the country in housing development is, put simply, what's called the NIMBY phenomenon, where people say, yes, absolutely, there's need for affordable housing for my children and my grandchildren, but then when the proposal is to build on where the garage is outside your window, they say not here. And the bigger and glassier and brassier the developments are, and the more they look as if they're not for people like them, then that raises tension. I think we also have to be honest that people who at the other end of the spectrum may have bought their places and therefore are very mindful of the value, and one day they might need to sell it, always get very nervous if they think that next door there's going to be, quote, social housing with, they assume, less orderly and less well-behaved tenant. I mean, we've got to be realistic about it. There are real fears and apprehensions and antagonisms.
Yeah, I mean, these prejudices are amazingly unfounded in my experience, but nevertheless they're very real.
And they're very real, and they very rarely are enunciated directly. And in London, they're less often racial than they used to be. They used to be absolutely very strongly racial in many parts of London. And they used to be, back in the day, about travellers and all the groups that people really thought were a problem. But now they're more about sort of social income levels type of ownership. So it's a real issue, and we have to be honest about that. The useful thing the church can do, and should do again from the beginning, is to make sure that it participates in those conversations, ideally to moderate and to challenge and to prevent the prejudice and the unfounded fears being something that take hold and allow people to repeat and propagate. And so being in the community conversations at the beginning, asking the sort of questions that really discover who is likely to come and what the mix is, to put at rest as far as possible the concerns of the people in the host community, is really valuable. It's no good seeking to do that only at the end of the day when the buildings are up and people have moved in. People need to know. People also need to know that there's a benefit to them of the new development. So, for example, if a new development is going to produce a nursery space that's going to be affordable for local families, if a new development's going to produce, like this very good Peabody development near here, which knocked down an old Peabody block, built a new block, and they've produced inside, it's not very big, but it's a swimming pool, which is open to the community. It's not a great Olympic-sized pool, but it's open to the community, and you can go there for your hydrotherapy and relaxing. And it's a very good community benefit, very unusual, creative community benefit, but it's open at different ages, different times of the week to different groups in the community. Really good, so that undermined any fear that this would, or you can do even practical things to make sure that in the new development there's everything from a facility to have the yoga classes, or to have the child minding, or I mean all sorts of things to make sure people start to go in and out of each other's spaces. And then as things develop, the church, it seems to me, has a key Church of England type role, given we are the established church, whatever views we all have about it, which is to host opportunities for the communities to come together, to ideally, it may not be in the church or the church building, but locally to host something, come and meet the neighbours, and do that on a fairly regular basis. No agenda, just an opportunity to facilitate conversation and dialogue, and allow people in the existing communities to come and meet and hopefully develop friendships and relationships with people in the new communities. And then there are practical little things that you can work on. There are organisations which invite everybody, existing community and new community, to participate in a way that will let you know if you need a plumber, or if you need a hairdresser, or if you need something. And again, it's a shared bit of information that both can benefit from, and it may not have been there before. So this will be a benefit for the existing community as well as for the new community. So there's an agenda of things, and I'm happy to work with you, and I'm sure others can work in their deaneries and in their parishes on what would be the sorts of things that could be a communication and sharing and community building agenda.
On a more political level, sometimes there's an atmosphere in a community of we just don't need any more of this here. And that can manifest itself as a general opposition to anything happening sort of across the board, really. Do you think there's a role for the churches in engaging with that sort of collective view, as well as the specific occasions when something has been developed and when there are actual new communities to get to know?
There's definitely a role the church could play, and some very good roles they could play, going back to faith in the city and all the sort of church's commitment to doing these things. The first thing the church could do, and it generally would be respected as an organ of truth, I think, is to be the local fact checker, a bit like the BBC during the Brexit debates, to actually be able to validate or question facts that are put out into the public sphere, whether they're on leaflets, whether they're in the social media, whether they're at public forums, actually to be able to collect very accurately the facts about, for example, what is the accurate, best official estimate of the number of people who are on waiting lists, who are the number of people at each category, so for single person accommodation, for 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom and 3 bedroom. What is the expected number of homes we need to build in Croydon or Merton or Sutton or Bromley or Bexley or Greenwich or Lewisham in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? And have that information available and be willing to challenge that through every means available, in the local paper, if necessary, by a short letter from the parish priest or from the archdeacon or from somebody else, in social media when stuff is bouncing around. On the radio, phone-in programs, particularly London phone-in programs, have some robust hosts and some robust commentary. And it's more difficult now because, of course, there's a much more diffuse media where these things are. The most important is actually to do it, I think, still, interestingly, in a written form through the letterbox, because if the church was willing and able, and I don't know what resources we have, but we could have more possibly, to have something which said, here in this borough, because people think probably in borough terms, or here in London, these are currently the facts and the figures about housing need and housing demand and so on, and just to put them out and say there's a debate going on about whether there should be the new big development in Croydon or Thamesmead or wherever it might be. The facts are these. We need this number of homes. We need to make sure that the mayor's policies that there should be X% of housing should be affordable. Affordable is this. Just the facts about what is possible and what people can campaign for. And I think that's one of the most useful things, to be there repeating. It's a bit like sort of biblical truth, really. It needs to be repeated often, probably, before it gets through. But at crucial moments, there are some political parties who will absolutely exploit new build and fan prejudice. And some of the most unpleasant experiences of my life were caused by leaflets which just were propagating horrible messages. You can't take them out of the letterbox and not have them delivered, but you can put something in. And the more authoritative it can be, the more it can be speaking on behalf of all the churches in the community, the more it can potentially speak on behalf of all the faith groups in the community. Together, we just want to share with you the facts of the housing position in our borough or in London. The more likely it is that you can start to pull down the inflated and often very unhelpful claims and counterclaims.
So people watching our conversation
From
churches and church leaders may well be thinking, this is all very well, but actually I'm about the church. Is this about the good news of Jesus Christ? How's this about the gospel?
Well, I guess we would have a similar answer to that question, and I hope members of the church would too. one of the wonderful things, one of the reasons why every time I look at the gospel story and look at the Bible, I am reaffirmed in my belief about its truth, is that Jesus' ministry was about meeting real needs. He absolutely lived a life of meeting real needs, and he commissioned his disciples and followers to go out and meet real needs. And the real needs are feeding the hungry, and the great chapter at the end of Matthew, which says that the judgment is by what you do to meet the needs of people, the orphan and the person in prison and the homeless and those without clothing and so on. And that's our job. And housing is absolutely at the top of that agenda. I mean, we have as much of a duty to be social missionaries as we do to be faith missionaries. It seems to me they inseparably go together, and we have to be there for people where their needs are. Jesus went to meet people where their needs were, and then left them to draw their own conclusions about whether he was the Son of God or who he was. We have to go and do the stuff in the community, and of course, if a byproduct is that people come to the church on a Sunday morning, that's great, and we will hope they will. But with prayer and engagement, we have to trust that the Holy Spirit uses that engagement, which we don't do for an immediate church reward in getting the electoral roll-up, but because it's how we can love our fellow human beings. And we have far less difficult challenges than most places in the world. We sometimes think, oh, these are really intractable, difficult problems. Mm-hmm. I mean, compared with people in Bangladesh or Myanmar or Malawi or, I mean, to be honest, we're in a different league, and we really should be able to feel that we can go in and do stuff, and the church has to gird its loins and be a campaigning, radical, Wilberforce type organisation, and it has nothing to lose. Mm-hmm. Being brave locally, leading the way locally, championing the cause, fighting for the underdog, making sure that people's needs are met, and challenging people who are wanting just to make money, people who are wanting to abuse the community, people who are not really listening, actually being willing to take them on. And if the church can be there, I think most people would be cheering them on and saying, I may not come to church yet, I may not come at all, I don't think I'll ever come, but I might. But actually, if anything's going to persuade me that this is a good place to be, then I'm following what they say and what they do, and I'm going to support them. And that way the Holy Spirit will be at work.
When Moses was encountered by God in the burning bush, he was given his commission to go, and he'd got the idea that this is what God wanted to do, and his last resort was, please, Lord, send someone else. People may be thinking, this is great, it's really what the church should be doing. Do I have to do it? Is it worthwhile? Should we do it?
The answer is, we're often called, and there is doubt and hesitancy. And we have to be honest with ourselves and with God and with our community about what we should do. But it won't be for everybody to go knocking on doors every day in town blocks. It won't be for everybody to go and stand up at the front of a public meeting and take on the developer. But there will be people in every parish. There won't be a single parish where there are not people able and equipped in different ways and different styles to do that. And we can learn from each other. We can work out how to do it better. And I hope this is helpful in making sure that people realize there are practical tools. Now, some people may do it for a lifetime. It may be their cause. Some people, as I will say when I encourage people to stand for election, you're not signing on for life. You can do it for 4 years if you get elected, and then you can reconsider whether you want to do it for another 4 years. So you're not locked in. You're not imprisoned by having to do it. But if you don't do it, collectively or personally, and as a result the community is more fractured and there really is a development that's no good, and relationships are poor, will that be a very good outcome if you're still a member of the community? So no, I ask everybody to think, it's one of the biggest issues in London: inequality, gap between the rich and the poor, crime, clearly, and meeting housing need. Of those three, actually getting housing better is the easiest of those three to deal with. the solutions are more accessible. So get stuck in is the answer, and you may be surprised. And little successes can lead to big successes, and little battle can lead to winning a bigger war. So we need you all. We need the coalition of the willing and enthusiastic, and the church militant needs to be militant on housing in London, north and south of the river, just as it needs to be militant on many other things around the world.
Simon, thank you so much for your wisdom and your enthusiasm. It's been great to talk.
And you too. Thank you very much.